Hello everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at the Norman rig. We'll take a look at its controls and how we can use them to pose this character. So in this video we'll be taking a look at the Norman rig, which I downloaded here at the 11secondclub.com. The 11 Second Club has a competition, a monthly competition, where many people create animations and submit them. They get voted on, and a winner is chosen each month. And also on this website there are the resources here, and you'll notice that there's actually a number of different rigs here. The one that we're going to be looking at in this video is this one, the Norman rig. And again, this is where I downloaded it from. I downloaded it from the 11 Second Club. The first control we'll look at will be this one at the base of the feet. And if I select it, you can see it's called the master control here. I can move it anywhere I like in my 3D scene. I can also rotate this control. This control is primarily used for placing the character in your scene. We typically don't animate this control, although we could. It's more for placing your character wherever you want in your 3D scene. The next control we'll take a look at will be this one here, the one at the hips. And if I select it, you'll notice that I can use my move tool or translate tool, and I can move it on any of these three axes that I want. And I can also rotate this control on any of these three axes. While I move this hip control, I want you to take note of the arms and the legs, and notice that they are behaving differently. The feet are staying planted on the ground while the legs bend at the knees, while the arms simply move with the upper torso. This brings up a very important point in rigs and animating characters in 3D. The legs are using what is called inverse kinematics, or IK, and the arms are using what is called forward kinematics, or FK. And we'll talk more about this throughout this video. Let's take a look at the inverse kinematics first, or in other words, the way that the legs are being handled with the rig currently. So, as I said, when posing the character, I can move the hips and the feet stay planted, however the legs bend at the knees. In addition, I can also grab the controls at the feet here. I'll grab the one at the right foot, and I can also move and rotate it as well. Notice that I can move it on all three axes. This is how I can pose the legs. Notice that when I move the leg here and I grab the hip control, the foot will now stay planted where I placed it. This would be very useful if I needed to do an animation, let's say, of the character walking upstairs. Let's take a little bit more of a look at this IK setup on these legs. I'm going to move the hip down a little, and I'm going to select the right foot, and I will rotate it a little bit to the side here. And what you'll notice is that it makes the leg look a little broken. It looks kind of painful, actually. That is because this setup has a separate knee control, which you will find at the base of the hips right here. This one is for the right leg, and this one is for the left leg. Let's select the knee control here for the right leg, and I'll simply rotate it to position the knee in what looks like a more comfortable position. So that is how, with this particular rig, you would pose the leg and knee using the control at the base of the foot, as well as this rotation control, which controls the orientation of the knee. Let's take a look at a few more controls on the feet. I'll grab the control once again. Remember that you can translate this control. You can rotate this control. However, you will also find that there are a number of channels on this control here in the channel box. The ones that we were just looking at were the translates and the rotates, which I was using simply by using the translate tool and the rotate tool. But these channels here work a little bit differently. Let's take a look at them. The way that you use these controls here is, well, you can put your mouse within the field here, and you can adjust it that way. You can put in a value. You can simply type a value in here. The way that I find it easiest to use these controls, however, is to simply select the word, in this case heel roll, and then middle mouse drag in my viewport like this. This is a very useful control if you were, for instance, going to do a walk cycle and you needed the foot to rotate from the heel. There's also a ball roll control. Once again, I'll select the word ball roll and middle mouse drag. Again, this is a very useful control for if you are animating a walk. The toe roll control, which will rotate the foot from the toe. Ball twist. And foot rock. These are all very useful controls for posing the leg and foot. We'll take a look at a few more controls on this character. You can see there are a lot of controls that we'll be looking at here. We've already looked at this control, which is at the hips, and we saw how we can rotate and translate it. However, you'll notice that there's another control just below it, and if I select that, it's an additional hip control. The difference being that I can rotate, perhaps translate it too. Let's see. Yeah, I can translate it too. However, that'll make the body look detached. This control is very good for if you need to move the hips, but unlike this control, you don't want the upper body to move with it. So that's where this control here will be very useful. Some other important controls here would be these yellow ones that you can see at the neck and spine. And if I select those, you'll see that I can rotate each one of them independently can be rotated. I can also grab multiple controls at the same time on the spine if I need to rotate them all at once. We have a control at the chest as well, at the base of the neck, as well as the head. And while you might not need this functionality, you can also translate these controls. Actually, it looks like you cannot translate the ones in the spine. However, you can translate the one in the neck as well as the head. Now, we've already taken a brief look at the controls in the arm, and I described how they actually use what is called forward kinematics, or FK. All that simply means, in comparison, let's say, to the legs where the feet stay planted on the ground when I move the hips, is that these controls will use the rotation to pose the arm. If you remember, I grabbed the control at the hip, and when I moved it, the legs bent at the knee. On the other hand, if I wanted to pose this arm and I want it to bend at the elbow, I need to use all these different controls, actually, all three of these different controls in the arm to pose the arm. These controls are using FK, forward kinematics. Now, what if I wanted to make the character raise his hand, as if he were, let's say, in school and he was raising his hand because he wanted to get the teacher's attention? I can rotate from the shoulder here, like that, and he can raise his hand. This, however, looks a little bit unnatural. If you were to raise your own hand, like you wanted to get someone's attention, it would probably rotate more from this clavicle or shoulder area. This brings up another important control here. We've got this control here at the clavicle or shoulder, collar, whatever you want to call it, the clavicle. They're calling it the clavicle. Notice that if I rotate from the clavicle instead, and then perhaps do a little bit of rotation on the shoulder, I get a much more natural look here when the character is raising his hand. So when posing your character, don't forget to use this clavicle control here. As we move down the arm, let's take a look at the hand. One thing that you'll notice looking at the hand is that there are no individual controls here to pose the fingers. So there's actually a different control here for that, and it is this one here that looks like a hand and fingers. The benefit of having a control like this, as opposed to these other ones that are right at the joints that they bend, is that it keeps the rig looking a little neater, a little more organized. You can imagine how confusing it would get if there were a bunch of controls here in the fingers. Now, the hand itself can be posed using this control, and you can see that it's just simple rotations. However, if I select this control, the palm hand control, let's say, you'll notice that it also has some channels here, just as the foot control that we looked at earlier had. This also has some controls, and we'll take a quick look at those. We've got the palm twist. Again, I'm going to select the word and middle mouse drag in my viewport. We've got a palm turn control, a palm bend control, cup, hand side to side, and a hand scale if you needed to change your character, make them have bigger or smaller hands, you could do that. We've also got a thumb control and various finger controls here. Let's take a look at we'll take a look at the index finger here. I'll just select that. And once again, notice that its controls are actually here in the channel box. If I select base, middle mouse drag, you'll notice that the finger bends at the base or at the mid part of the finger, as well as the tip of the finger. In addition, we've got a couple other controls like twist, spread, and stretch. These will allow you to really fine-tune the hand positions and make them look really, really good. Another thing to take note of is that I can actually select multiple channels at once. I have the base, mid, and top selected currently. Middle mouse drag in here, and it will bend at all three positions on the finger at once. I can even select multiple fingers and bend multiple fingers at once. So that is how you pose the hand. This is oftentimes when students look at this rig initially, this confuses them oftentimes. They have a hard time figuring out how to pose the hand. This is how you do it. In addition to all these controls on the character's body, we also have some controls in the face. So let's take a look at those. So if we look at the controls in the face, let's start with, let's say, the right eye. Notice that I can rotate the eye. If I select both eyes, I can rotate them both at the same time. And like the hand and the feet, you'll notice that there's a bunch of other controls here in the channel box when I have the eye controls selected. So if we take a look at some of those, it looks like we have some controls for controlling the eyelids. These will allow you to get some nice facial expressions. It looks like we even have a control to control the pupil size. That's kind of cool. We also have these brow controls, and you'll notice that its channels are also in the channel box, and we can pose them also to get some nice facial performances and expressions. The nose control, on the other hand, simply uses the translate, rotate, and scale, but this could be a nice way to change the look of your character. If you want to make it look like a different character, you can see that even just placing the nose differently makes it look like a different character. Of course, I could also scale it, rotate, we have our mouth controls here. Select this one at the corner, at the right corner of the mouth. Once again, you'll notice the controls here are in the channel box. You can explore those and see how you can pose the mouth using that. Notice that I can bring the right corner up and I can bring it out if I want to make a nice facial expression, a smile or something like that. There's even a control for making it look like he's puffing out his cheeks there. There's a corresponding control on the on the left side of the mouth as well. We've also got this control in the middle of the mouth here to change the placement of the mouth. Moving on to this control here, you'll see that this is actually a very simple one. While you can also use the translates and the rotates here in the channel box, you can also just use these tools here and you can translate the mouth or move it up and down. You can rotate it so it actually rotates in a more believable fashion as if it were on a hinge here. I'm going to open up the mouth to show you the next control, or controls, which will be these ones here, representing the tongue. So I'm not going to move all of them, I'll just move perhaps this middle one, and you can see that you can pose the tongue as well. This would be very important to use if you were doing a lip sync animation or maybe with some facial expressions. These would be very useful controls. So the controls that I've shown you are enough for you to be able to do most of what you want when posing this character. I'm going to show you, however, a few of the more advanced features with this rig. And the first one I'll show you is on the legs. If you remember, we currently are using IK, which is why, inverse kinematics that is, which is why the feet stay planted on the ground. However, if I select this control here, what you'll notice is that there is a FK-IK switch, a forward kinematics IK kinematics switch here. Currently it is set to 1, which means that the IK is turned on. If I want to turn off the IK, I will simply change that 1 to 0. Notice that when I did that, we have some different controls here now. Also notice that if I grab that hip control and I move it, the left leg is still using the IK, but the right leg is now using FK, forward kinematics, meaning that it'll behave more like the arm currently. So if I select the control at the hip here and I rotate it, you can see I can pose this leg using simple rotation now. In addition, there's now this toe control that wasn't visible before. So now I can pose the character using FK. I recommend when you first start working with this rig that you either pick IK or FK and then stick with it for your first couple poses using this character. Watch what happens if I select this control again, and let's say I select the FK-IK switch here, and I use my middle mouse button in the viewport, and you'll notice that I can bring it back to the IK state and back to the FK state. In fact, I can interpolate between the two states here. Remember that the primary difference between the IK and the FK is that the IK keeps the leg planted, like on the leg, like the left leg, and with the right leg it moves with the body, it moves with the hips, and it is entirely posed using rotation. So you do have that choice with this rig. We also have that choice with the arm. So currently the right arm is set to FK. However, just like the leg, if I select this control, this EX control, and you can see that it's set to 0. The FK-IK switch is set to 0. If I turn that on, again the controls change here. I get some different controls which will allow me to use IK. The arm stays planted. This would be perfect if I needed to do an animation of the character, let's say doing push-ups. I can grab this control at the wrist, and I can also pose the arm this way as well using IK, inverse kinematics. Just like the IK leg example, there is a control at, in this case, around the shoulder area, that will give me elbow control through rotation. If I select that control and I want to switch back to the FK state, I can simply select the FK-IK channel here, middle mouse drag, and it goes back into its forward kinematic state. Currently it's not horizontal to the ground right now because I posed the clavicle here, but if I set that back to 0, you'll see that it goes right back to its original placement. There are a couple other fun features with that are a little bit more advanced that we can take a look at. I'm going to look at the left leg, which is still using the IK. I select this EX control here, and you'll notice that there is a channel here called Stretchy IK. Currently it's not turned on. So if I were to grab the hip here and I pull it down, the foot stays planted. I bring it up and the foot stretches out, or it extends out, overextends, let's say, pointing to its foot control here. However, if I select that control, the EX control, and I turn on the Stretchy IK, I'm going to just select the channel here, middle mouse drag to bring it all the way to 1. If I grab that hip now, you'll notice that the leg stretches. This gives you a nice stretching effect that can be useful in animation. Just be aware that actually you have the same controls in the arm as well. If you were to turn on the IK, we could turn on the Stretchy IK, and then the arm will also have this stretchy effect on it. And yet another interesting control here would be this one here. I'll select it. Currently, if I move it, nothing happens. However, if in the channel box I tell it to follow, currently it's set to 0, but I'll turn it to 1. Now, notice what happens if I rotate the head. You'll notice that the eyes now want to look at this control. And in fact, if I were to grab that control and move it around, you'll notice that the eyes always want to look at it. So that's a more advanced feature of this rig, but a fun one to use, a useful one to use when animating. Perhaps in a later video I'll go over a few more, even more advanced techniques regarding the IK. In particular, these controls here, the world root hip hips and pin controls. These work with the IK, but give you a little bit more flexibility with them, but I'll leave that for a later video. I think that what I recommend doing is playing around with this rig, get comfortable with it. Don't try to do anything right away with it first. Just test out all the different controls on it, see what they do, and then from there, take it and try to make a interesting pose with this character. I hope this video has been useful for you, and thank you for watching.